politicians, and we hope that we can deliberate further this afternoon on those. I'd like to call on our chairman to give us. The chairman wants me to do his work, and I refuse.
Very much for opting for that. First, when I got the invitation to chair this function, I was wondering what it was that gave me this difficult assignment. Is it because I have a record as a very troublesome young man when I was young? Is it because I heard the National Media Commission, that's the media regulator, and there were lessons here for me? As I listened to Zaria, Felix, Doc, and they said, I get a feeling that I was brought here to be schooled. And I think that I have learned very much. Let us begin from where we began. When Doc said that UNESCO had declared that since war began in the minds of men, I just hope that everybody took note that when UNESCO in 1945 said in the minds of men, they actually meant men, not human beings. Because at that period, everybody who mattered and took decisions about life and peace was a man. And those were the decisions they took. And that is the point that Zaria brings us to, that we will make progress both in society and in our communities when we recognize the redeeming values of our diversity as human beings, not only in terms of culture and language, but also in gender differentiation, and to build peace for ourselves through that way. But let me tell you a very small story. A couple of years ago, we met at a joint, and Mr. Egbert Fable, who is likely to speak to you this afternoon, asked me if I remember the story I had done in 1999. I have had the misfortune, you were told, I was a very active student leader. I would not hide from that. But outside that, I also working as a journalist, worked in almost every major conflict in Africa. This 1999 story was one story I always wanted to disown. Why? Because I had done a story on Côte d'Ivoire, in which I had said in my concluding lines that I can only look at Côte d'Ivoire with the pastoral premonition of Robert Frost. That the woods are dark, lovely and deep, but there are miles to go before peace would come to Côte d'Ivoire. And I had considerable doubt if Côte d'Ivoire will have that peace. Just a month after that, the first coup d'etat that toppled Konan Bedie happened. And following from that, Robert Gaye's attempt to conduct and rig elections, which led to the mass protest, which ultimately broke up Côte d'Ivoire, happened. So what did George Sarpong know to have predicted that Côte d'Ivoire will go down the way it did? And that is precisely the reason why I wanted to disown the story, because for a considerable length of time, I could not enter Côte d'Ivoire even in peacetime, because everybody thought that I knew something about what was going to happen. And I needed to explain. If we are to be honest, I cannot pretend that I did not know. Why did I know? The people who would eventually end up as the rebels, I think it is on record, and therefore we cannot deny that. If you watch the key people who led the rebellion, Guillaume Soro and all those people, most of them were student leaders. If you check the period of their student leadership in Côte d'Ivoire, it would coincide with my own service in Ghana as a student leader. Okay? check that against most of the rebellions that you have seen across West Africa, and you will strangely discover that we were a certain generation of the same across board. There's a sense in which we knew we cannot pretend what would happen. So when I predicted that the crisis was going to happen, it was as much flowing from my own journalistic assessment of the situation as it was, honestly, from my knowledge of the critical participants in those countries. In this discussion, we've heard stories about Tunisia, we have heard stories about Egypt, we've heard stories about all those crises. If I showed you a picture of how any of these protests emerged, I would be able to point to you and show you personal pictures of the key organizers of those movements and our private pictures 20 years back. What does it mean? Nothing happens by chance. In most of these pockets of protest, for those of you who are critical watchers of history, you would be shocked to notice that it was those small groups we had constructed around Africa in support of the Palestinian cause that became the hub for the mobilization that later expanded to become the basis of the protest in those countries. Add to that who the key movers of arms in our region are. You would be coming closer to why the comments that Zaria said, Felix, Doc, everybody has said, that you cannot take the peace in Ghana for granted. Why? Because the threats that existed in those societies that I know of were far lesser than the threats that exist in Ghana. And I say this with a lot of caution. I was one of the critical participants, one of the key experts who drafted Ghana's architecture for peace, which led to the creation of the National Peace Council and those related institutions, including the Small Arms Commission and a few others. Sometimes, when I look at the analysis that we did and the fears that we had about what could unravel in Ghana, I get worried. I hope that it is quite fair to recognize that my senior in student activism and youth mobilization, and now a big politician, has walked into the hall. Mr. Damboche, welcome. Please clap. You wanted to clap. You know, because I'm not important, they don't believe that I can identify an important person. Well done. The organizers insist that Honorable Damboche join them up here. And the people have agreed. So as Mr. Boche comes up, I want to wrap up by reminding ourselves that the threats to peace are enormous in our country. I challenge each one of us here to just walk across the street, talk to Jones Apley at the Small Arms Commission. At some point in our history, Ghana as a peaceful country had more arms than any of the fighting countries. You know why? You know why? It's simple. I mean, this doesn't require analysis. Everybody who is moving guns is doing business, isn't it? Yeah. Every businessman keeps his property where it is safe. So nobody carries his property that he is selling for purposes of war in that war zone where it is not protected. So anytime there is mass destabilization in a region, okay, the conflict entrepreneurs protect their investment in those peaceful, small oases around. It is just that simple. Okay? No matter how well you mop up, you will still have vulnerabilities. And that is why I think that we shouldn't test ourselves as Ghanaians. My last reminder to you, we say that we are very peaceful. I believe it, even though I doubt it. Check against your own knowledge of us. A couple of years ago, there was a scare in town that there were, you know how men protect their manhood and, get very nervous about it. There was some scare that there were guys around that if they touched you, if you were a man, something could happen somewhere. Did you see how bestial all of us reacted? That is how easily we can kill. So if anybody tells you that the Ghanaian is so peaceful and cannot kill, please look at how innocent, non-warring people lynched people on the streets of Accra and Kumasi. That is how easy it can be. I want to end this my long prattle by thanking the organizers for this function, by thanking them for bringing me here to learn, and thereby thanking all of you for permitting me to waste a bit of your time. And I just hope that as we keep working towards peace, all of us will keep the lessons of our and share it with others. Thank you very much.